All right. Well, welcome to the Heartwork Guild meeting of June the 20th, 2024. And the agenda is on the left-hand side of the screen for ready reference. I'd like to begin, as we usually do, with a land acknowledgement, and I would like to invite Ben to do that on our behalf.
Right. We begin with the land as a reminder that the land was here before we were. The land will be here after we are long gone. And we only exist as human beings because the land brought us up, caused us to be. And so we remind ourselves of that fact as a reminder around perspective and keeping a healthy and grounded perspective, and a reminder to be in right relationship with ourselves and with each other, knowing we're all in this together. And so it also is a reminder for us to acknowledge the ancestors that have come before us, the people who have discovered these truths and passed them down and provided all sorts of guidance in how to be in right relations with each other. And so we recognize also a debt of gratitude to all of the keepers of that tradition, many of whom are coming from indigenous cultures, and many of whom have struggled to keep this truth alive in the face of great adversity and colonization. And so we also have this as a reminder that we need to right things where they have been wronged. We need to heal relationships that may have been wounded, however they have been wounded. And maybe also aspire today to be in right relationship with each other right here, right now. And in that spirit, I'm going to just suggest that we each take a moment to ground ourselves and to bring ourselves into this space. And I invite you to settle yourself in the seat where you are, find a position that is comfortable. And then just take a deep breath in, breathing in cool, energizing, refreshing air. As you exhale, feel the weight of your body pressing down into the seat and the seat rising up to support you. Take another deep breath in, feeling that freshness, that energy coming in. And as you exhale this time, just let go of anything that no longer serves you, anything that keeps you from being present and here, any discomfort, any darkness, any preoccupations. Just let it all melt away, knowing that it can return to the earth, be used by whoever can make use of it, renewed and regenerated, and return to us as fresh energy. So one more deep breath in. And on the exhale, just finding your way back to the circle. Back to you, April.
Thanks, Ben. Roland, would you like to go over the agreements, or would you like me to do that?
Oh, I can.
Okay.
So the agreements are there as suggestions on how to be here and how to show up. So you can interpret them in the ways that are most meaningful to you. So we're all in this together, and you have choice. Choices have consequences. We lead with curiosity, kindness, patience, compassion, and gentleness. We listen for understanding, speak from the heart. Keep in mind that things are both and, they're not either or. There can be multiples. Have fun, find the humor, and keep it simple. And a reminder that the sessions are recorded, so likely if you are seeing this at some point in the future, you're watching the recording. And to Ben and April, do either of you have anything that you would like to add that you might need to be able to show up and be present? Or do you have any questions or concerns with the agreements as they stand? All good?
I'm
Okay.
good.
Back to you, April.
So just a reminder of what the main and primary function of this guild is, of a number of guilds. This guild acts as the emotional heart of the Lifeboat Academy and invites us into deeper relationships and into reflecting on what it is we do and how it is that we do it. The main responsibilities include then building and deepening internal relationships, but also conviviality and celebrations. What is it that we are achieving together, and how do we talk about that? This guild leads us into experimental spirituality, which is a reconnection with the land, all of our relationships there, and re-indigenization. It includes personal healing and grief work. And the guild itself acts as kind of a thermostat of what's going on in the emotional heart. So we observe the vibes that we see and feel. We witness what's going on, and we use our work as a lens. This guild also keeps the circle process and the agreements, and in terms of reinforcing them and reminding us that is something that we follow. And the further agenda for this meeting is found under the subtasks. Is it time to ask if someone will take notes? Okay, Ben.
You don't have to ask, I will.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was only polite to ask. Just to mention that we have some items that are left over from conversations in past guild meetings, and they are around the coordination of the 6 conversations and the Connect the Dots Club. We also agreed at some point to draft a brainstorming template so that we can have some consistency in what we mean by that and how we do that. Creating a single reference point where we can talk about or sort of cite our favorite resources that might be useful to other people. We've agreed to write a blurb for the Connect the Dots Club. So, in terms of agenda, it looks like we have a discussion about Connecting the Dots Club, and then moving into a discussion that I think we've started a number of times, but haven't actually got deeply into, which is Heartwork and Philosophy badges. What would they be? What do they look like? What do they refer to? Is there anything else in terms of agenda that's not noted here? Nothing.
Are we in circle?
I think we probably are at this point, and the circle, I think, should be Ben, April, and the second Ben. Otherwise,
rock, paper, scissors, who's first and who's second. I've been Ben longer, so I think I should be the first Ben. I feel like getting through the Connect the Dots, moving the Connect the Dots forward. I just as the establishing the Heartwork badges has been sort of lingering on the agenda, so it's only there because we brought it up before. So it's kind of our choice about whether or not we want to keep it on the agenda. I am mostly about the Connect the Dots Club today, and if we cover anything else, I'm fine with that. So over to you, April.
Okay, I think I concur entirely with what you said, Ben. So over to Roland.
Agreed. Back to you, Ben, or April, or I don't know.
Back to April.
Okay, in that case, I think that we are going to come to grips with the Connect the Dots Club, formerly called the Book Club. And I expect if we have spare time and spare brain power, we might think about badges at the very end of the meeting. So luckily, we have something written down about all of this. And not only is it written down, but we know where it is. It's right in front of us. So good work, somebody, on knowing where that was. Shall we go through the proposal? Is that a good idea at this point? Okay.
I think at least, yeah, I think I need to remember where we are. I know we have some things that are settled and some things that aren't, so I can't quite remember where things are. So I would love a refresher.
Okay, I'm in this the same state, I have to say. So how about I'll just take us through this and then we can see what we need to do and if there's anything else we need to know. The purpose and the goal of the Connect the Dots Club, which formerly was just sort of, oh, let's have a book club, is quite a serious and fundamental purpose, I think, which is, what do you need to know to build a lifeboat? And how is it that we could express to other people what we know about that? And are there already resources that exist that are seminal to what it is that we're trying to do? And we suspect that there are. We know there are. And so the question about what you need to build a lifeboat and what would it be useful to have in our back pocket as we do that is central to this. We saw this club, so-called, as a natural kind of occurring follow-up to the 6 conversations process that were underway now, and that the 6 conversations are the basic way into thinking in this kind of way and acting in the ways that we need to build a lifeboat. And then the Connect the Dots Club is almost like the next step on, so that it takes us deeper, answers probably more questions, and brings in other people's experience with this. I'm not sure I understand what are the other components that the Connect the Dots Club connects with.
I think it was just we connect with the 6 conversations, but we also might connect with other work. I think it was I have only a vague memory of it, and I think it was just we know there's this connection. We need to be open that there might be other connections.
Mhm.
What connects after the Connect the Dots Club? So we know 6 conversations are before, but what comes after? Actually, that's
Great, yeah.
I
And
think it really was keep our our radar open for other connections.
and often stuff emerges and unexpectedly emerges, so being able to sort of grab that as it goes by too. One of the other purposes is to generate the reading list for the first semester Introduction to the Lifeboat Academy course, which also the reading list also serves as the lit review to to the research about everything it is that we're doing. Part of the reading list would be the main topics that we've identified as useful to this project. What do you need to know? And then each of those represent 1 or 2 sessions of the seminar. And each could also represent a second level follow-up course to go more deeply into the topics. So we would also have a short list of the resources and references in each topic area. Try to figure out how much would be reasonable for people to read in a week or two, and an assortment of materials to provide an overview of the whole thing. There might be a set of additional readings too, which would be syllabus of a course in each topic area. So there's a sense of development here from just what are interests and what we think are good resources into how do we build into a course that speaks to the needs and also gives a good survey of what the heck is out there, and then moves into deeper dives in the topic areas if necessary. Who do we want to participate? What's the focus? We would invite the faculty of the Lifeboat Academy, prospective faculty, and grad students to develop the list. And the intro course would be of interest to undergrads at the Lifeboat Academy. But they might not be especially useful to include in the generation of the list. Is that, do we mean that undergrads would not be especially useful to include in the generation?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so it might take a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more experience to be able to generate things that make sense in the whole.
Yeah, I think we were thinking, well, I am thinking about the follow-on to the 6 conversations. The initial connect the dots is kind of high level. Like we're expecting people to come in with some base knowledge. Not that everyone knows everything, but you're not starting fresh. So you're coming in with some, you're coming in with some knowledge. I think maybe it's like you're coming in with at least knowledge about one of the areas.
Right.
If there are, if there's a breakdown and it's kind of it's almost like a survey course, that you're coming in with an understanding of at least one area, and then you're connecting the dots to other areas, but you're not having to get up to speed right on everything.
Right. Right. Okay. So it's a managed way of dealing with the knowledge, with eliciting a knowledge base and dealing with it. Right. Okay. Roland, anything to add to this or questions about any of this? Right. Being immersed up to your neck in this already. You okay. This also, as we continue on with sort of developing things over time, and as the stuff grows, there's, I think, an implicit call to commitment in it. That you're already committed to some extent, you're curious, and then you might be committed enough to do 6 conversations or 6 sessions, and then broadening that to look at what else is there and how else you might be involved and so on. It seems to me there's some progression there possibly. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Can you? All right. So we are in phase 1 now, prep work, which we thought would be approximately 10 weeks while the 6 conversations are underway. Since the it's the first time that we've run the 6 conversations set up. So this sort of lets us see how that is going on and get some perspective on it, I think. At the same time, while the 6 conversations are going on, we are brainstorming or eliciting in some way favorite books and articles. We have an invitation out to that to folks. The Heartwork Guild is meant to seed the brainstorming process, by which I take it to mean that we're supposed to be contributing to the single reference point and pre-populating it. And what we will be pre-populating it with are the title, author, type, subject, the level of it, theoretical, strategic, practical. And then we will send this brainstorm to people who are active in the lifeboat system for their feedback, right?
Yeah, and actually this is past tense because we have the single point of reference that is populated. And we have started to, we've done our first experiment in the engaging people. And so far the results of that experiment are it was not particularly engaging, but that's how experiments go. So that may be one of the things we talk through today, because that's also part of the seeding of the brainstorming process was uh, and I will take responsibility for this. There was a feedback loop that I wasn't able to connect to bring people into the we have the Facebook poll, but we didn't have well, in Carnival Land they call them shills. We didn't have our shills lined up to actually answer the poll and generate some enthusiasm for other people. So and there may be a technologically a question in there as well. So but yes, this is underway right now. And so a lot of this is past tense or current tense.
Okay, so we are swimming upstream with this. And I have to say, I think I was probably supposed to be one of the shills to help pre-populate something and haven't done that yet. It's on my list. Okay, so drafting the brainstorming template. Have we done anything on that yet?
Yep. Yeah. And it's basically I kept it simple since it was already underway. What we have in the brainstorming template was the plan that we would generate one poll question per week as a follow-up to the 6 conversations.
Right.
And but like I said, I think that template maybe we need to revisit to see
Sure.
if that's still the way to go. And the other thing too, I just think it's important for context that um, the intention behind this is primarily around engagement and not primarily around the gathering the favorite books, because we already have a significant constellation of work. We've got enough that we can move on to the dot voting exercise if we wanted to, because we've got enough stuff in there. We've got like 35 references, and actually you just added 2. I still need to add them to the list, and I got another one today, so and it may be switching tactics from trying to do a Facebook thing to doing some other thing. Anyhow, so I think that's part of the conversation today.
Okay, so to summarize, there are favorite resources coming in, but the level of engagement that we wish to have is not yet there.
Yeah, they're coming in because we talk about this stuff all the time. They're
Yeah.
not coming in because we've tried to get people who aren't normally in the conversation into the conversation.
Right, so the outreach part is not yet, the outreach switch has not yet been thrown to cause outreach.
We threw the switch. There was a fault in the system there, somewhere between the switch and the little engine that actually generates the outreach. We did what we said we were going to do, and uh, maybe we need to try turning it off and turning it on again. Something like that.
Thank you. Okay. So anything more we need to say right this second about drafting the brainstorming template?
Roland, do you have anything you want to add?
All right, so that moves us into starting to identify core materials with a dot voting exercise, but it sounds like that might be a little bit premature if we want to have more engagement.
I think it might be, so this is the plan that we have. These are the phases that we have now. And I think we're kind of identifying where we're at. And so I think if we go through it, does it still make sense? And then we can talk about where are we, and because I do have some things that I want to talk about with the brainstorming template, but I think as a first step, let's just check
Okay.
to make sure that this all still makes sense with where we are now, what we've learned, and then we can come back and look at the particulars.
Great.
Is my
Okay.
suggestion, if that's
So,
okay.
yeah, that makes sense to me.
Mhm. Me too.
Okay, so some questions about how we do the dot voting exercise, and then just before phase 2, that we process what the results are, and identify topic areas, themes, key resources, and so on. Design process for phase 2. We don't know yet how phase 2 works, right? We are going to at some point engage folks in the process.
And I feel
And-
like that's the step that we're at now.
yeah,
And I think building on what Roland was saying, I think there's going to be a back and forth as we start thinking about what phase 2 looks like. That's going to inform how we refine, how much engagement do we need, want, when, where, how does that happen? Maybe it's entirely in the dot voting part. So yeah.
okay. We still need to set a starting date for the Connect the Dots Club. I feel like it's already happening, but that's, because of our background discussion, that's not necessarily reality that it's already happening. And one of the operative questions is how long after July 16th, which I think is the last date of the 6 conversations, right? Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
And we'll be providing ongoing updates to the coordination circle. So how this can get coordinated into other guilds and who to involve. And the coordination of the 2 includes what we said before, follow up to get people sharing, and inviting people who want to be in the Connect the Dots Club to some of the 6 conversations to sort of will cause some engagement or some sort of glue to happen there by them seeing what the conversations are about, how they're done, and what is elicited from them, right? And promoting the newsletter, through the newsletter and social media, the Connect the Dots Club, including writing a blurb to use in the next upcoming newsletters. And do we have any additional outreach beyond the above is one of the questions. Any comments on any of that?
It still makes sense to me.
Good.
And just comment around the blurb. I completely forgot about preparing a blurb for the most recent newsletter, but I've added it to my to-do list.
Great.
And
Okay, well,
I don't know, I'm not sure if I have the writing skills to do it easily, so I'll probably just throw something together and get somebody else to edit it for me.
hang on. Also, Ronnie just posted in Slack this morning a section of a follow-up. So I will say, I think the other thing too, in terms of past tense, we are well coordinated with the 6 conversations. And this is actually, Ronnie was preparing a follow-up from our last conversation. In that is a blurb about the Connect the
Right.
Dots Club. So that's what Ronnie came up with, not being here in these conversations, but it is potentially a starting place for the blurb. Anyhow, so I just posted it there as kind of a reference point.
Great. Okay. Phase 2. Conversations about the reading list. And so the question is, how many sessions will there be? How many conversations about it and when? And for the conversations, some of the questions are, what are the core subject areas? Have you used this resource in your life? And if so, how? And what are the criteria for prioritizing a resource? I really like the question about, have you used this resource in your life? And if so, how? Because it really takes it out of the, wouldn't it be nice if, into the, I tried this and it worked in this way, but not in that way.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it real. I think it's real grounding.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the follow-up or next steps after the Connect the Dots Club? Right.
And just as a comment, the questions for discussion, those were just some that very, very brainstormy. They were things that we kind of came up in conversation, so I put them in there as a placeholder
Right.
so they wouldn't be lost. But we haven't discussed them or vetted them or anything like that. They're just possibility. I actually will put possible.
Free-floating possibilities at
Yeah.
but that's great that they don't get lost. Great. Okay. And phase 3 would be to invite people to the first run of the course, and what feedback do we want to gather from participants, and clarify expectations for undergrads and grad students. So I think that's just sort of different levels, and what does that mean in terms of depth of engagement and maybe as a timing for some things, and how do we know if we're being good grad students or not? Okay, so the next steps are, and we don't know much about phase 3 beyond what we've said, but that's probably all that we need to know at this point. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's going to be so much that will come out of phase 2 that's really gonna, I think as long as we have just a rough idea that there is, I think it's important to remember that the first thing that we're doing is not the seminar, going through it, that it's actually the first stage has to be a little bit more generative and maybe free floating. And that moves us towards something that feels a little bit more fixed in like a syllabus.
I think that's good. It also brings in the collective way more, and allows other voices to be in there.
Yeah, if we pre-plan phase 3 too much, then phase 2 doesn't have a point.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
just based on the way that we wish things had been when we were in those roles instead of what the possibilities are. Okay.
Yeah.
Next meeting, how does dot voting work, and what are the sessions of phase 2 are two of the questions that came up there. Is this the end of the proposal now that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything beyond this is all of the basically the notes from the many conversations that we had.
Right.
Leading up to the proposal.
Yeah, which actually, I like having the notes of the considerations too, because I can check to see if I've missed something or, something I was puzzled about. And I can't hold it all in my head all the time. So being
Well,
able
and
to,
there are things that show up in the considerations that are a good idea, but then don't get followed up on right away, but are still a good idea. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
it's a nice way of being able to sift through. Okay. So what is the next thing we need to do here? Now, do we need to consider the questions like how does the dot voting work and all of that, or is that too nitty gritty for how we
I'm
approach?
I'm going to suggest
Well,
we
now
do
that
a
we,
circle. Go ahead, Roland.
yeah, that I was going to just say the same thing now that we've gone through the proposal. Does it bring anything up? Is there anything that we feel like we want to talk about, and that we do that in a circle format? Um, and yeah. So where do we start? Who would like to start?
I'm the first Ben, so I will start. And I will pass to April, and then we will pass to second Ben. What is coming up for me is actually the one of the things that I remembered as we were going through things was, and I think April, you're the one who said it, is the connect the dots as the spine. And so I'm thinking about and I'm thinking about mapping as well. I think we've talked about it. I can't remember where we talked about
Yeah.
it, but thinking about not as a list of resources, but actually as a map of the territory. And I wonder how generating a map together of the territory would shape phase 2. So with that, I pass over to April.
And I agree with both things you said. Uh, and I'd forgotten that we kind of talked about this as not just a list, but a constellation of stuff, really. And then for me, my mind goes right to mapping. Because I find that's the best way for me to keep stuff sortable. It's not yet sorted, but it's there and it's being held there in a way that I can understand and start to process. So, and this makes it way more interesting for me because I require high stimulation and lots of visual input in every minute. On to Roland.
I'm looking for and need a place where I can apply the AMAC reflect without it sounding like criticism. We identified that the survey didn't elicit any responses. Would it be all right to have a conversation around what happened, what worked, what didn't work, and what can be improved on? So over to Ben.
Yeah, um, I think that would be great. And I think well, in one sense, what didn't work was execution, because we had talked about something gets posted and then the um, friends and allies go in and kind of feed that a little bit. Um, So I think in one sense, we may have confirmed one of our suspicions that just putting a poll on Facebook is not going to do anything. So in some sense, I think there's some confirmation there. And so then it becomes a question also of how do we execute better this time? We can always be throwing, well, and actually the other thing too is there's some development in the 6 conversations, because as our follow-up, the facilitation team decided to do an email. That's actually what the earlier thing I posted was, an email follow-up to the people in the 6 conversations. So we could, and it's out open for conversation right now, and it could be that we put something in that email, not on Facebook, or in both. So um, yeah, I guess those are my one thought is we didn't execute the way we said we were going to. The other is maybe that's a good thing, because it might be that we do something. I think we always wondered about the technology and like, how does social media work here? And so I think that's still an open question, and I'll pass over to April.
Yeah, I like this looking back at the survey idea, because I have only the vaguest sense of what it looked like, sort of, or the details, I guess, that would help me pin down some things. Yeah, I think I kind of lost sight of the whole survey thing, and hence don't have any opinions whatsoever about it, but want to have opinions. Over to Roland.
I'm actually curious. So, April, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Is that all right? Do you get the Lifeboat Academy posts on? I don't know how you use Facebook or how often you check it. I'm curious. Did you see the poll in your feed, or did you get?
I didn't see anything.
I didn't see anything. I check Facebook basically daily and pay more attention to the lifeboat posts and to other
Okay,
ones.
because at the coordination meeting, I think I had understood that Ronnie said that they had posted the poll, and I didn't, I don't, I hadn't, I didn't, I saw it, but I didn't know that I saw it. Every once in a while, somebody else will, I'm usually the one who does the memes, and every once in a while, somebody else will post something, which is great. And I the so I was curious to see if either of you had seen the poll, um, because you may have. I don't know if you had the same experience as I did.
I can tell you I didn't see anything. I didn't see
Oh,
anything. Oh, the
okay.
only thing I've seen were your memes.
Okay.
So I haven't gotten, yeah, I didn't get anything that indicated a poll that I should know about.
So there was something posted. When at the coordination meeting, I went back and I looked again because I had noticed that Ronnie had posted. I thought it was a meme. It's this big. It looks like a meme, and it says resilience, and then a definition of resilience. And then I went back and looked at it again, and then I saw that in the what is it, the subject line or the comment at the top, that was the poll question was there, but I think I missed it because the image was so prevalent. So it made me wonder about um, um, well, presentation to start, it also made me wonder about, um, um, we're asking kind of an open question, like just put in a book title or a film or something that inspired you. And uh, I was wondering if putting in something that actually looks more like a poll, like SurveyMonkey, you can use to put on Facebook, but I don't know if they have something that would look like that. Might be, and on Instagram, I think still have to look at that, but I think it's easier to do a poll like that on Instagram. Um, anyway, so I started wondering about format and such. And it could be just actually having a meme that is the poll instead. So those are the types of questions that I had. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm. So I'll pass to Ben.
Partly, I think there is a technology. This is also where I think we want to figure out what's the 20 that gets us 80 and not fall into a technology black hole. And I think that what Ronnie was doing was that you can only create. Okay, so technically, I know that we cannot put a poll in our Facebook group because it's a private group. Or if we put the poll in the Facebook group, and that would be a Facebook poll that looks like a poll, then only the people in that group can answer it, and it can't be shared because it's a private group. So if we wanted to have it shareable, it had to go on our page as opposed to our group. And the problem is nobody really sees our page. And the other problem is even things, I don't know if you've ever looked at, the reach when we post something in the group. We have 60 plus 70 people in the group, and usually it only reaches 4 or 5 people. And that's a Facebook algorithm that Facebook limits what is shared with the people in our own group. So, and what Ronnie needed to do was to create a meme that linked in the group that linked to the poll that was on the page. So you create this, that's part of the reason why it didn't look like a poll, was because it was only a link to the poll. And in part, what this is telling me is that this is not technology that is conducive. If we're trying to figure out how to do a backbend around Facebook not wanting to share our things, then and the you were saying, what was it? Is it MailChimp or Survey Gizmo or whoever does the Facebook polls?
MailChimp.
MailChimp.
Sorry, I'm not sure. I have it somewhere.
Whichever it is. So that might be worthwhile exploring, is there's a different technology that allows us to share in multiple places and it looks more like a poll.
Right.
So that's, I think, I think that's a very legitimate question.
Yeah.
But it's also that balancing what technology wants to let us do with how much effort do we want to put into it. So I think that, the fact that I didn't even get anything that said there was a poll in the group that we have, whether or not I could see the thing, recognize it as a poll, I didn't even get the meme. So yeah. I'm sorry, I was actually trying to find the poll itself.
I've just posted in the chat the SurveyMonkey page that talks about how to use that on Facebook. And I can go and look for the meme or the poll on the Facebook page.
Not the meme, but the poll.
Yeah.
The poll, okay.
Yeah, I was trying to look for that.
I just looked for it and recognized the meme and didn't even see at the bottom it said poll.
Yeah.
For what it's worth. But I think, yeah, you've got to the crux of the matter, which is that the technology and that particular media is not allowing us to do something that's quite a simple thing, actually, but because of the way they construct the connections and so on, it's not working for us. So I think we should try the poll again in another way if we can.
Well, and one of my questions was because if it makes sense to try to use SurveyMonkey, does that make, for the type of question that we're asking, does it make collating the data easier or not? If it doesn't make it easier, then we shouldn't use it and just figure something else out. But if it does make it easier, then it would be worthwhile figuring out even just this one time for future uses.
That's over to me.
Yes.
Again, I think in this case, we don't really care about collating the data. I am more, we're more interested in actually getting people to answer than, I don't think, because really all we're talking about is a book title and an author, and that goes on a list. And if it's easy to collate that, we just have to make sure that we're kind of we're not letting anything fall through the cracks. But I agree though, for the future, in that spirit of, kind of developing a template of a way we can do that. Well, and actually, so I have an account for what was Survey Gizmo, which is now Alchemer. And they are a competitor for SurveyMonkey, so they probably have a Facebook thing. And there's also MailChimp, which we have an account, we have an active MailChimp account. So we don't have a SurveyMonkey account. And you can set up a free one, but if we can avoid, having yet another account somewhere, then so that would be one question, would be to explore Survey Gizmo, SurveyMonkey, or MailChimp as alternatives. Over to you, April.
So yeah, it sounds like figuring out another platform that gets us what we want is a good thing. And that we shouldn't actually come to any conclusions about how much engagement we had until we know we have a platform that'll put stuff out in a way that people are able to engage with. And my other question is, besides the Facebook group that has 60 or 70 people, do we have other mailing lists of folks that we've been in contact with one way or another? Is this an important enough thing to engage by email?
Well, and I'm sorry, I'm out of circle.
On to Roland.
Well, I think in terms of engagement for this round, I think that the fact that and I may, if I misunderstood, let me know, but my understanding that none of us knew that the poll had been posted. So there was we didn't engage with it, and we didn't try to pass it on.
Yeah.
Because
it was
it's
in
possible.
Slack.
It was in Slack. Right?
It was in Slack, so I did know that the poll had been posted, but I didn't go look at it, and I didn't forward it to other people.
Right. So So there's the possibility the Lifeboat Academy is linked to other groups on Facebook. So it could be shared there. It can also be shared on Instagram. And I suspect that Instagram could be more effective. It seems like there's more interaction on Instagram than on Facebook. So those are some possibilities. In terms of email, well, I think that it's interesting. One of you had mentioned bringing it up as part of the six conversations and inviting people who are part of the six conversations or who are interested in it um, to volunteer something. I think that's a really good idea and a way of engaging just in terms of the six conversations. Um, yeah, I think I'd need I'd need to for us to talk through a little bit more about emailing to a larger group because it could be a form of um, keeping people engaged who are through we've got a mailing list on the CRM. It could be a way of engaging people that way. So it's an interesting idea. And I think I just need to talk through it some more. Over to you, Ben.
Well, and for me, I come back to what is our purpose here? Why are we doing this? And which makes me lean heavily against sending it out to a large list. We've talked about this, the Connect the Dots Club is for faculty, prospective faculty, and grad students. Most of our email lists would be predominantly undergrads, if that, so our who is it we want to talk to? Who needs to know about it? I think the six conversations makes a lot of sense. Our guild member list, which is not the same, like we have,
Yeah.
it's a small list, right? It's uh and I think that, actually the Facebook group, if we could figure out a way of actually getting people in the group to see it, I think that's a really good area. But I think for me, the key question is who and why. Who do we want to talk to and why do we want to talk to them? And so I don't feel like this is a shotgun approach. I don't think uh and it's already, we already are contacting anybody who is on our larger mailing list, which is about 600 people on, just the Lifeboat Academy mailing list. Then we can get them through the newsletter. We can link it that way. And really it's more kind of the other groups that we might want to reach out to. Other Yeah, I think I would want it to be, and especially at this stage, what this is kind of the prep work just to get, or at least my understanding of this phase of the work is just giving people a taste of something that's coming and getting them interested in it. It's not heavy lifting, and so keeping that all in frame is, I think, useful. So over to you, April.
Yeah, I agree with what you've said. I think this does need to be targeted carefully. And this gives us practice in targeting too, in who goes to, who gets what, when, and why are probably questions we should have tattooed on our forehead, or at least on a post-it note stuck on the top of my computer, to keep on track with this stuff. And we do know that places that use social media best are the ones that ask the right questions and then match what they're doing to the best platform. And we're still finding some of that out, I think. But I'm pretty impressed that there is a mailing list that has 600 names on it. That's good stuff. On to Roland.
Yeah, the comment about the mailing list and who's potential faculty, graduate, or and who's undergrad. Um, but does that apply also in terms of if we go beyond the Facebook group and for the Lifeboat Academy Facebook group and because Instagram would be just anyone who has liked the Lifeboat Academy. And if we post to other groups that are linked to the Lifeboat Academy but are not the Lifeboat Academy group, then are they grads or are they undergrads? And is
Hmm.
what does that mean? You know, and is it different because it's sort of casting the net wide to draw attention to the Lifeboat Academy, as opposed to sending the email to the list of 600, which are people who are already aware, but not necessarily grad. You see? So,
Yeah.
so if we're not sending it to the 600, but we are posting to other groups on Facebook, what does that mean? And does it make sense? So I think I've started to work through for myself a little bit sort of a rationalization around why Insta and Facebook still make sense, but agree that sending it to the 600 might not. But I will now pass to put that into the pot to talk about. Over to you, Ben.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's bringing up two things for me. One is um the CRM is different than the mailing list in that, the mailing list we haven't really segmented, but the CRM is. And this seems like, how are we making sure that we've made this distinction?
Yeah.
Do we go back through our CRM and update people as, I think, faculty, grad student, undergrad, or unknown? That would be and this is, I think, how do I want to say this the right way? There's only so much time in the day. And one of the things that would be useful if we had more time or more resources would be being more on top of the CRM and updating information and updating records. And it is a known habit of value that I don't have the time to do it. I want to do it. I recognize the need to do it. I just can't keep up on top of it. So there, there's that. And I think that the difference between I'm following along with you, Roland, um, and I think that the key difference so the thing about the list of the 600 email addresses that we have is it is only ever going to be those 600 people, and they're very unlikely to forward it. But if we post something on the permaculture page, it is very likely that somebody we don't know stumbles on it because they just happen to be there. And so even though maybe they are an undergrad, maybe they are potential faculty, it makes sense to put it out there just because there's an open-ended potential. Whereas the people on our mailing list are not going to forward this to anybody. So I think that is kind of the one is more, maybe we'll get something, maybe we don't. But in the social media world, it has the possibility of linking us with somebody who we wouldn't have been linked with otherwise. So I think that's the difference. But it is, I think that's really useful to be able to kind of hold that, I guess our strategy for when we use email is different than social media. And so even when we're talking about the same question, and that's also, I think, when we reach out, if we're doing this kind of in-house or, in our group, then any question is probably a reasonably good question. But if we are going to post this in other Facebook groups, then we really have to have a good question, you know, and a good platform. It has to work. So yeah, those are just some thoughts. Over to you, April.
Well, two main thoughts. One main thought is that we have lots of assets actually at our fingertips here. And the second thought is that I don't always know which assets use when, which is what we've just been talking about. It would be very helpful for me to have a matrix of what all the platforms are, what their main strength is, and what nature and level of question is best posed where and when, I guess. So, and that's what, of course, social media professional people do all the time is they have that matrix at their fingertips and they just mix and match to figure out what the best conduit is for the communication that they have to hand. But it would help me to have that kind of a matrix laid out somehow. That's all that I have in my brain at this minute. So I'm going to pass on to my colleague, Roland, who appears to be holding a wall up right below me. So that's a good
Yeah,
thing.
well,
Somebody's holding.
I
Yeah.
came inside because I've set up my table on the porch. The internet, I think it's not a good good connection. So I'm just inside now. And so in terms of the matrix, is that a request that would go to the Outreach Guild? Or is that something that we want to take on? Um,
Oh,
yeah. So, well, and if I'm understanding your description, because it would be about, you know, how to put the word out, and that's more of an outreach thing. So that's why the question came up in my mind. Um,
Um,
yeah, and um, are we at a place where we could talk about what the next iteration of the poll could look like? Over to you, Ben.
um, so in terms of the matrix, I don't think we have exactly that, but we have a prototype of that, because I'm trying to remember what we had. A digital onboarding level 2, I believe, is the digital onboarding level 2 document lists how we use social media, when we use it. It probably can get enhanced because I think we're getting into some discussion here that could improve it. And it's making me think of using the onboard the help desk,
yeah.
because that's part of the reason why we have it is we can refer people to the material, and if it's missing something, you can add a comment that then puts a placeholder for the person who's responsible for updating it. So it could be, you know, how we can figure out how to elaborate that grid. And so this is also a reminder of the, you know, the jokey thing. We probably have that written down somewhere. So when we're coming up with ideas of something that needs to get created, is it already created and just needs to get updated? And yeah, I think I'm also looking at the time, and I'm feeling I think this has been useful and productive, but there's a part of me that's like, why aren't we talking about phase 2? You know, we spent our whole meeting talking about this, uh, and I'm wondering if we're getting a little sidetracked. But yeah, I feel ready to kind of say what's the action item that comes from this, and or action items, and and go from there. So over to you, April.
Yeah, I think we are at that point, and I think the reminders that the Outreach Guild exists to outreach is a good one, and that one of the next steps should be to have a conversation with the Outreach Guild about does this exist already, or can we enhance something? Because it would have been very useful to have that in for me at the start of this conversation. So I think that's one of the action things. And yeah, in terms of phase two, we're getting close to that line to moving into planning for that. I'm not quite sure if we're there yet, but we're getting close to that. Over to Roland.
That sounds good to me. I would volunteer to draw up a mock-up second iteration poll post to discuss if that works for the rest of the guild. Over to Ben.
I guess I don't understand what you mean by a mock-up, because if we're going to use Survey Gizmo or something like that, then it would be that would be the design,
Oh,
right? It would be designing what the actual poll looks like.
okay.
And so and actually I would really caution away from trying to mock up something that looks like a poll, because it won't work like a poll. And that could be frustrating to people. So I think there's research. It feels like the next step is, so I'm going to make a proposal that whatever we do goes out. We don't worry about this. We were going to have something that followed up on each of the 6 conversations. I think we let conversation 2 go. The email goes out. There's a mention of the Connected Doctors Club. We don't worry about the poll. We start to think about, either for the next conversation or the one after that, how the poll follows up on it.
Okay.
And so that buys us a little bit of time. And I think we need to do some research on using survey. And I can take that on, but it may also fall through the cracks. Because I don't think, it doesn't feel to me like a high priority compared to other things that are on my list. I feel like I am a reasonable person to do it because I have some knowledge going into it. And somebody else could also do some research if they had more time. So over to you, April.
These are all good next steps. I could do a little bit of research too, but it's not going to happen before 10 days are up. I won't have time to look at anything for 10 days or so. So that might be a wanting to be useful, but not likely to be timely assistance, I guess. I don't have anything more to say about next steps. Except I'm trying to figure out what the link is between this sort of thing that we've done and what we've come up with and phase 2. Like, I guess we're on the path. I'm just not sure where the path is. Over to Roland.
Yep, I'm agreed with all this stuff. And I will likely be doing some research also so we can compare notes. Back to
Oh,
you, Ben.
cool. I also feel like, just to, make it clear and explicit, this whole thing feels like if it's a nice if, it's not a essential. And what is essential in my mind is actually having people do something with the long list before we start.
Oh.
The one-stop shop and the dot voting. I feel like getting that sorted out is probably, and actually Lumio, to tell you the truth now, Lumio might be another one of those. Where did I have that listed? Oh, there. Because Lumio has really, really cool engagement features. And if they are shareable, like, we can do a dot and vote exercise on Lumio, I know, easy sneezy. So if we started using Lumio, if we figured out how we can get people using Lumio from Facebook, then that's just an easier connection. That actually has me more interested and excited in this. Okay, cool. So are we good on that? Anything else to add on the poll side of it, sort of the second iteration of trying to do engagement through polls? Okay, cool. And given the time, do we want to try to tackle anything else, or just say we've done good work on this and we still have the whole phase 2 thing, and by the next time we meet, we will be at conversation 4
Right.
of the 6 conversations. So we will be within 2 weeks of the end of the 6
I'm okay
conversations.
to continue if you want to continue.
April, how are you feeling?
I can continue until 3:45.
Okay.
And I'd like to talk about the dot voting business.
Okay. Instead of phase 2?
I think we can finish the dot voting conversation pretty quickly and then have a few minutes to look at phase 2.
I admire your enthusiasm and optimism.
We'll see.
That's right.
Over to Roland.
Yep, let's see what we can do about the dot voting. I'm fine with that. Over to you, Ben.
Well, I'm going to pass back to April. So what are your thoughts on the dot voting?
My thoughts on the dot voting is we can't do it until we're pretty sure we have 90% of the resources that people are suggesting. I don't know how we're going to know that, but I think we have to, we have to have a big enough body of stuff and then, deal with the last few things in some way, I believe. So until we run another poll, we won't get more resources, right? Am I right in that?
No, you're not right
No,
in that.
I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, resources can come in a variety of ways. It is not poll dependent.
Okay, good. So at what point should we do dot voting then?
I find it's
Are we still
really
in a
challenging
circle?
when there's a question, when when you pose a direct question and we're in circle,
Yeah.
it's really hard to know what to
Yeah.
do with that.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
Well,
I'm not,
if I would like to propose, if there is a question, then that's the end of your turn, and you pass on to the next person,
Yep.
because I think I've got something to
Yeah.
that could answer.
Okay.
over to Roland.
All right. So my understanding from there's already the start of a long list that has some 30 odd resources. And I feel like that is a large enough number that even so the poll is an engagement tool and a tool to be able to get resources that we might not be aware of, so we can keep adding to the resource list. I think a 30 plus item list is long enough for us to be able to start the dot voting whenever we want. So that's I think that whenever we want to do the dot voting, we're good to go. Over to you, Ben.
Well, and I think that it's actually the sequence. I think we don't want to do the dot voting also until it's right before. This is why I wanted to talk about phase two, because knowing what happens in phase two directly impacts whether or not how we use the results of the dot voting. I wasn't thinking of the dot voting as any kind of final vote. It's still it's only preparing the materials for further elaboration in the actual Connect the Dots Club.
Oh, okay.
So, more ideas are going to come up. I guarantee, doesn't matter how many surveys or whatever, how many items we have in our resource list, as soon as we get into the conversation, somebody's going to say, oh, I also read this other book that now that you mentioned that, it makes me think of this, that they're not going to share ahead of time. So it's going to, the resource list has got to be open-ended. And I think, and I also think that I agree with Roland too, in that once we vote, the it's your thing, April, about, strategic planning is really about what you don't do. And I think it's the same thing here. The dot voting is about where do we put more attention, right? It's not about eliminate, doesn't mean that things that aren't voted aren't important. It's just that they're probably less central or something like that. So yeah, so I feel like when we do the dot voting depends on how that fits in with what we do in phase two. Over to you, April.
So I guess the implication is that we can do dot voting now, or in the next couple of weeks, or whatever. My question about that is who is doing the dot voting? Is it all the people that gave the resources? And that's, I mean, over to Roland.
Yeah, I don't know. Does that become, I mean, I could see it potentially being another engagement tool for sort of targeted to people that we'd like to engage, or that we think might be like, I think the 6 conversations people, um, that would be, this is the other things that we think about that you might be interested in, and whatever. Yeah. So over to Ben.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've been thinking about it. It's an engagement tool. It's not, I don't think I don't see this as creating the definitive
Mhm.
reading list on resilience. I'm assuming that it's the process of it is actually more the point than the outcome of it. And so, yeah, I think the people that I want, if I could target people, it would be potential faculty of the life. But I want to know, I my interest is in getting people to be to use scarcity well. I think it's to use for me, the dot voting is really about, yeah, there's lots of cool things. It's sort of that question about how have you used this resource, or have you used this resource? For me, it's and I say this from a completely self-centered position. I get recommendations every day. Every day I get at least one new book, probably more than one book, and several websites. And I can't possibly keep up with reading all of the things that people suggest out of good intention. So, one of the things I want from myself is, what are the key things I need to know? And so I want that from folks who aren't just excited about everything. I want it from folks who have actually said, if you want to know what my heavy go-to is, this is the one I come back to. This is the one I reference. So yeah, for me, who I want to do the dot voting would be potential faculty, and it's always going to be this ongoing. Somebody's going to write a new book, someone's going to put out a new book. So back over to you, April.
So there needs to be some discernment then in this. And I think when we do this, it can range from, a week from now, 2 weeks from now, on into phase 3. Or is this just the first step? Do we want to be doing this sort of process over and over again then? And do we want to build that into our plan? We want to do engagement over and over again and with new people. And so do we want to make the prioritizing of any kind of list to be happening all the time and to be, in our toolkit? Are the questions on the top of my head at this minute. Over to Roland.
Well, one of our working, well, whatever you call it, one of our tools is AMAC Reflect. And we will likely continue to be receiving suggestions and recommendations, and we'll be coming across new resources. And well, and really, how do other how do educational institutions deal with new resources? So I could absolutely see that new resources, I think, are always going to be present. So what do we do with this is always going to be in our minds, so that we would forget to do review of our list of resources, I think, is relatively slim. And while saying that, I also recognize that we often forget to ask ourselves, do we have that written down somewhere? Until after we've had a long discussion about what to do with something. But I think it makes sense to revisit resources. It may also be an iterative process on how often we do it. I could see it potentially as either a seasonal review item or as a yearly review item, sort of a charrette review or something. Yeah, I think maybe not even that frequently. Anyway, it might be a once a year thing, but I think that I don't know how often would make sense. So over to Ben.
Yeah, and part of the aim, act, reflect is don't reflect until you've acted. Don't reflect until you've the feedback cycle needs to match the natural life cycle of, it's like going and checking on the garden water every hour doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You only need to check daily or every couple of days because that's the span of time that kind of works on. And if the phase one, phase two, and phase three, if phase one is just trying to generate interest, and phase two is trying to come up with the first version of the syllabus, and phase three is actually doing the syllabus, then it actually makes sense that it built into that process, there is a review and update that happens. And I think that it's also, I want to bring us back to the kind of fractal nature of this. And it's just really easy to fall into, command control. I'm from the government. I'm here to tell you what's right and wrong. This idea that we are somehow creating the resource list. And as opposed to we are creating a handy guide that helps map the territory. And, the map is not the territory. And there are going to be resources that pop up that we didn't know about. There are going to be resources that are already out there that we didn't know about. So there's something about using, and when you use the map, you update the map. If you're using the map and it turns out the bridge washed out, you circle on the map, no more bridge. So I think that yeah, when it's revisiting this in the time that what Roland said, it makes sense to kind of figure out what's the natural ebb and flow. I'm thinking it's probably an annual or seasonal or annual. When we run the webinar or the seminar, when we run the seminar, we update the list. Over to you, April.
Yeah, and I was starting to think the same thing. I was thinking in terms of seasonal, if we're doing this in a seasonal way, or for the seasons when we are doing this, I guess. So yeah. If I have some sort of question around how to identify faculty or potential faculty, if they're the ones that are going to be dot voting. But we don't need to actually know about that now, I'm thinking. And I think I've forgotten what the difference is between phase 2 and phase 3 of this. Over to Roland.
Well, and I was just looking at the time, and this might be a perfect segue to at least touch on discussion on phase 2. So I think that this was good, and we made a good use of time. I don't have anything to add to it. And so I would suggest that we move on to phase 2 discussion. So I'll pass over to Ben if we're agreed.
I'm agreed. Yep. Over to you, April.
Yeah, agreed.
Back to you, Roland. Back to you, Roland.
Okay, phase 2. Back to you, Ben.
What is it? April? Um, uh, well, I'm thinking a lot about the mapping. I am thinking there may be the possibility of GASP, something that is not done in circle. That there is some other way of having this discussion. And actually, I'm thinking about sort of visual, like doing a map, actually working with a Miro board, post-it note, something like that. And what's coming forward for me is something about relationality. It's less important the resources than the connections between the resources.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly where to go with that, but and the other thing too is, I guess, a, a desire of mine for how phase 2 works is I want to avoid the book club idea of, I liked this part. I thought this was interesting. That I want this to actually be a useful resource and I'm not sure. So what is the use value in it? So those are my thoughts and actually the other thing too is also mapping maybe people with resources. So, people who are knowledgeable about or familiar with a constellation of resources. So it's not just the resources, it's also who's a good person to ask about,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So those are my thoughts to start. Over to you, April.
Yeah, I'm having similar thoughts, and I'm even thinking that there is the constellation of resources with the connections made, and then an overlay of the people. So if you want to go farther with this, ask Bob down the road, because look, he falls there on the overlay of the map, the next layer, I suppose. And you could layer groups too. If there's groups that have specific expertise or have used a resource in a practical way for a long time, why not ask them? Get into their help desk system, basically, I'm thinking. And I agree. I think the Miro board is a very good place to start with this. Now, when we do our map, is that before or after we're doing the dot voting, or is it separate? Because that could simply be another overlay onto our map. Could be, here's the 7 things that popped up that floated up to the surface as being most seminal, and most people think everybody needs to know these 7 things. Here's the next layer down of these are the next most important things, but if you have to pick a few, here they are. And then the third layer down could be somebody thinks this is important, or however you want to label that. I can see my whole next year mapped out in mapping around this very issue, which is only one of many. And over to Roland.
I feel like I would like to make a distinction between the mapping and the Connect the Dots Club activities. I agree. It's not about the resources. The resources don't provide the answers, but they are tools to working together, even if it's working through ideas or working through an actual project. And I'm seeing perplexed glares, so I'm going to I'm going to open this up to others. So over to you, Ben.
I want to throw it back to you because I think I'm just trying to follow along. So it's not a perplexed glare. It seems like you're tapping into something and I'm trying to feel into what that is.
Okay,
So can you say more about it?
sure. So I guess it is that the Connect the Dots Club isn't only about the resources that we're talking about trying to get a list of resources together, and but we've also been talking about it as uh, or the way that I've started to conceive of it is that it is um, a part of working out um, the the coursework for the academy, and that there are different types of courses. I could I could see coursework being actually just um, uh, circle discussions around specific agreements, as an example, in addition to using written resources like books and that kind of thing to talk about a specific topic and I think that it's actually it could also be interesting just to have anyway. Um, like Ben was saying, the Connect the Dots Club is not a book club, so it's not specifically about reading through a book and asking what do you think, but it is rather an opportunity to be able to have um, uh, discussions and to work through ideas and issues that um, inform and shape and build the lifeboat and the Lifeboat Academy. Now I'm done.
I think this is why I want it as a map because, and this is, and the reason why I wanted you to say more, because I feel like this is kind of also the connection or the usefulness of it. And it may also be, so if we treat everything as an experiment, including education, where really the way the education part works is we are supporting people in crafting and running their own experiments, then what does a course look like? It's our received model is experts have written down the right answer in a book. You read and memorize the book, and you report back the right answer in the right situation to the pleasure of the instructor. And that is not the model that I am working on. And so even if we have the right books, there's no, it's sort of the books are really only, well, and we talked about it, it's kind of the lit review. So it's
Yeah.
the books are how can we help people sort of fast forward to the best version of an experiment by avoiding unnecessary experiments. And it's, I think, a little bit, maybe that, and I don't know how this factors in, but I was thinking about the idea behind the scientific method is we don't prove truth, we disprove falsity, right? And so it's not about part of that mapping the territory is, here be dragons. It's kind of don't go here.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a blueprint. So it's really interesting, actually, like thinking about what's the connection between coursework at the academy and the Connect the Dots Club. it's almost like the Connect the Dots Club is helping you figure out your own lit review to set up your own experiment. So, and I like this idea that there would be some testing no matter what. And it's not that I don't want to have conversations around what parts you like or don't like, but I'm much more interested in conversations around what parts are most useful and what parts are less useful, something like that. Yeah, I don't know where to go with it, but I look at the time and we're at time. But I'm sad that we're at time because I feel like there's something really, really interesting here. Over to you, April.
Yeah, there is something really interesting here. And I also think we're calling for, I mean, to put this in comparison with a book club, as I understand it, because I've never actually been part of a book club, being fiercely independent, that there is something about being able to do critical thinking, not critical pessimism thinking or putting barriers up to other people's stuff, but critical in the classical sense of critical thinking, I think. That goes beyond what I like or don't like. I mean, you know, again, looking for the indicators of what of the character of the piece that we're looking at or whatever. And it is like action learning all the time as an undertone to this. And developing that means you have to develop a vocabulary and a process and figuring out what the center lines are and what the guardrails are around the conversations. And I think that's my last thought of this session. And on to Roland.
Yeah, at this point, I've got nothing to add. I think it's been a good talk. Over to Ben.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like this is a good place to stop. You know, it's a sort of a pregnant pause for the next time we get together. And I would like to encourage us to continue the conversation in between meetings if we can. Yeah, yeah. So in terms of concrete next steps, we can put a feeler out to the Outreach Guild about the enhanced social media grid. I think that's a nice if, not a requirement. And it seems like our big next step is doing a little bit of research on the technology to redo the poll.
Yeah.
And oh, and then the ongoing, I think Roland and or any of us thinking about that blurb and responding to what Ronnie has put out as a starting point. And you know, it might be that's anyhow a red herring, but what I'm seeing for the two next steps really are exploring the technology and the last thing I just said, which I forgot already. Oh, the blurb.
Yes.
Over to you, April. Are we good to anything else for?
No, nothing else right now. On to Roland.
I'm wondering to encourage the conversation in between meetings if we and I don't know if I will do it, but I I would engage in doing it, but sort of reviewing our conversation and coming up with at least a comment or a question around what we've already talked about in like the next little while,
Hmm,
actually giving us some sort of discussion homework.
like reflection homework, really.
Yeah. It could also help to clarify what the agenda will be at the next meeting also, for like what the hell is this? And that it looks like it's the beginning of a lengthy conversation that we can agree to, instead of doing it in an email, to do it at the next meeting, something like that, something along those lines, general shape. Over to you, Ben.
I like that idea a lot. And I think it can be, I'm reminded that uh, several iterations done lightly are more effective than one iteration done heavily. And so this seems like a really easy thing to put between the meetings, where it can just be, we send out an email and we all agree. One, caretaker sends, I'm just gonna, for hypotheticals, caretaker sends out a mid-meeting check-in that invites everyone to reflect and to, answer the question, what's up? Whatever, it can be a very general question. And then that just sort of sets the course for the next, especially we spent a lot of time reviewing where we were, and I think that was great, but if we can come in with a, a more grounded understanding, then we can get more done in the time we're together. Um, so over to you, April.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'm not sure that I will get to it. But I do think it's a good idea. I have to say I review the notes between meetings, but I don't always click into what they're actually about until we're talking. So it's almost like I need the conversation as the reminder, not what I've written down about it. But anyway, that's possibly just me. Over to Roland.
Cool. So as a caretaker, I can send a, a mid hiatus email to as a prompt.
Great.
Oh,
Over to you, Ben.
good. Works for me. And I feel like it's a little mini experiment. This could be, especially yeah, just a new habit to try out. And yeah, yeah, I like it. I do. I find I try to do my daily notes where I sit down at the end of the day and I just kind of wrap up what was the meeting and what are my next steps. And there is something about that. Doesn't take a long time, but it sort of holds everything together and I can come back to it. And I feel like this is kind of the same at a group level. So cool. All right. I am good to go. Over to you, April.
I am good to go. Thanks, you guys. And yeah, onwards and upwards. Roland.
Cool. It's been a long meeting, but I think that it was a good one. There's a lot that happened, so that is lovely. Back to you, Ben.
I'm done.
Bye, gang.
See you all soon. Bye.